is Jack Trimarco. Jack is an American hero. He does things that make our justice system better, makes me feel safer, and he's also a regular on Dr. Phil and had his own court TV show. Not too shabby. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning, John. How are you?
Fantastic. And it's 7:35 in Beverly Hills?
In Beverly Hills and at my home here near Ventura, California.
Thanks for getting up early. We're all the way, literally across the country, across I-10. As far as we can stretch I-10, that's where we are, Fart. And
that would be the beautiful state of Florida, if I recall.
That would be. We're all the way at the edge of it, and I admire what you do, man. We were talking before we got you on air about passionate and overzealous fans, and I know you're working on. You've actually helped make the justice system better with the San Francisco Giants-Dodgers case. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, a very well-respected defense attorney in the state of California is Tony Brooklier. And Tony contacted me back on the 30th of May of this year and said that he had a client by the name of Giovanni Ramirez who had been arrested by the Los Angeles Police Department for the horrific beating of Brian Stowe on opening day after the game when everyone was starting to head back to their cars out in the parking lot. Someone had attacked Brian Stowe from the back because he had a giant jersey on, and they just beat him to almost to death. And they took off and jumped into a car, and that was the last that they'd seen. And then there was a composite drawing done of an apparent gang member. He had some tats around his neck, a teardrop under his eye, and a parole officer called in about 2 weeks later and said, "Hey, I think I've got a parolee who looks like the person who beat up Brian Stowe." And so the LAPD appropriately jumped on that lead, and I don't know what the investigation early on revealed, but they ended up smashing in his door, making entry into his apartment, and arresting him. At that time, found a gun in his roommate's bedroom, which was and turned out to be a violation of his parole, for which he's doing 10 months now down in the San Diego area.
Wow. And ultimately, you performed a polygraph on Giovanni, correct?
Yeah, John. Tony and I got together, and Tony said, "Look, Jack, I know I tell you this all the time, but I really believe this guy didn't do it. He's given me a timeline. He's told me who he was with. He told me where he was exactly when the game was being played, and that there's other people, friends of his, that will vouch for that." Well, of course, John, as you and I know, people vouch for a lot of things, relatives and friends, when they shouldn't be. And so I really didn't know going into it, as is usually the fact. I didn't know whether he did it or not. I should tell you that 4 out of 5 people that I polygraph fail my polygraph test because they did it. And they take the test hoping that they're going to read something on the internet or get some information from a buddy who's had a polygraph, or I should say misinformation from a buddy who's had a polygraph, and they're going to have these hopes of quote unquote beating the polygraph process.
Right.
And so 4 out of 5 of them fail. I went to Men's Central Jail in downtown Los Angeles, where Giovanni was being housed, and under the authority of a court order, I was allowed in, and then Giovanni and I spent about 3 hours together, and when I walked out of Men's Central Jail, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that the LAPD had arrested the wrong guy.
Wow. And it happens. You know, criminal defendants oftentimes are no angels. Sometimes you get somebody that truly hasn't done something, but and I do a portion of my practice is criminal defense work, and it's just guys like you, guys like me, are trying to make the justice process better and work better because the state is after a guy and they got to piece together with their limited resources, the guy they think it is, but with polygraph examinations and everything else, there's some outlets out there that'll the proof is in the pudding. How does a polygraph? Sometimes with personal injury work, I have to explain the molecular structure of how magnets work together for an MRI to work. It's a crazy long explanation, but what's the general explanation of how a polygraph works?
Well, John, we know, and we've known for 70 or 80 years, that when a person tells a lie, things change. More specifically, the autonomic nervous system experiences very, very subtle changes when a person tells a knowing lie. Now, moms are probably the best polygraph examiners in the world because they're with little Johnny 24 hours a day. And they know that when little Johnny changes behaviorally, verbally, he's probably telling a lie. For example, John, little Johnny wants a cookie and it's close to dinner time and Mom says no. So Mom leaves the kitchen. Little Johnny furtively looks around, jumps up on the counter, grabs a chocolate chip cookie, jumps down, goes over in the corner, munches the cookie, and then Mom comes out into the kitchen. She sees the top off the cookie jar. She sees the trail of crumbs. And she sees little Johnny over in the corner wiping his mouth. And she says, "Johnny, did you take a cookie?" and he looks down and goes into the almost fetal position and says, "No, Mommy." Well, she knows immediately, based on the physical evidence and the fact that Johnny doesn't ever respond to her that way, except when he's ashamed of telling a lie. She knows that little Johnny took the cookie and he's lying about it. Now, the tragedy attached to this little vignette is that Johnny is going to grow up to be a better liar. He's going to realize along the way that when he acts deceptively through either body language or verbiage, that people are not going to believe him. So he becomes better at it. And so the term deviation from norm is really paramount in the world of lie detection. The body language specialists look for those little nuances in their normal behavior that change. Now, that having been said, John, I had a show on Court TV for 2 years called Fake Out.
I was hoping
you'd get the host and the expert.
I was hoping you'd get to this.
And anecdotally, I know that unless you know the person, you are not going to be able to pick up on those nuances. There just are very, very few commonalities in the world of lie detection that are true across the board. People say eye contact. If a person, well, you know what? I think generally that's got some validity. But if you don't know the person, then you don't know what their deviation from their normal behavior is. An exception to that is when a person repeats the question back to the person doing the asking. When I was a kid in northern New Jersey and I had the car, when I was 17, my dad said, "You've got to be in by 10:30 every Friday night, no exceptions." And many Friday nights I would shut the lights off and coast up the driveway and close the door as quietly as I could because it was 10:45 or 10 to 11. And the next morning my father would ask me, "Did you get in before 10:30 last night?" And I would say, "Huh?" And that was my Freudian pause. That was my chance to think up an appropriate, innocent response. In other words, what will Dad believe? And then I would say, yeah, a big fat lie.
Right.
And when I was 30 years old and I was being sworn in as an FBI agent, at the little reception at Quantico afterwards, my mother and father confided in me that they always knew when I was telling them a lie because I would always say, "Huh?" and we had a chuckle over that. Well, in the world 2011, people need more time than "huh." "Huh" doesn't make it for a liar. And so often we hear people who are on the spot, especially the first time the question is asked, which is, by the way, the best time to discover the lie, we get that question asked back to us. For example, I'm talking to little Johnny, or let's say Big Johnny, who was a suspect in a bank robber, and he says he didn't do it, but we talk about it. We talk about the Bank of America, and he says he's never been in there. And after an hour, I'll say, Johnny, if no one's asked you to this point, let me be the first. Did you rob the Bank of America? And Johnny says, he looks me right in the eye and says, did I rob the Bank of America? Red alert, red alert. No more, huh? He needs some time to formulate an appropriate, innocent response. In other words, what is Jack Trimarco going to believe? What should I say? How can I say it? I got to sell it. And so he says, no. Well, it's too late. 5 seconds have passed. And one thing that the listeners should remember is that the truth is almost always direct and spontaneous. As soon as he thinks, what will I say, what will I say, it's too late.
You got him. And I deal with some of that in depositions and examinations under oath, where you've got somebody that's just, that's lying for one reason or the other, and you're exactly right. And it doesn't show up on a written page. You're not going to look at the deposition transcript and realize this person sat and thought about their answer for 10 seconds, and but right off the bat. And then the other thing is, the old expression, the devil's in the details. If you ask somebody the same question 5 times and they're skewing on the details, you got them.
Exactly, John. And it's a very an enlightening process. I've done over 3,500 polygraph tests, and my next one is going to be more interesting than my last. I often have people write out a statement and then test them on the truthfulness of the statement for various polygraph reasons. And Johnny, we'll use Johnny again. Johnny will write out in a statement, I did not steal any money from the Bank of America. Number 2, I did not know that the bank was going to be robbed before it actually happened. Number 3, I do not know the name of the person who robbed the bank. And number 4, I did not receive any of the proceeds from the stolen money taken from the Bank of America. This statement is 100% true. Now, the relevant issue, John, becomes, did you lie in that statement that you just signed? And is the statement that you just signed completely true? Now, I'll always have these folks review it. And I'll say, all right, now before I ask you these questions on the test, I want you to review them one more time and tell me, I want you to cross out the weakest of those 4, the one that makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, and because I only need to use 3, not 4. So cross one out. Cross out the weak sister of the group. Now, most people who are getting ready to pass the test say, nope, everything's true. They don't take any time to review it. They know everything that they just wrote down is true. It's the person who studies those 4 short sentences looking for the weakest of the 4, he's going to have a problem.
I'm going to go give 4 sentences to my girlfriend. She's standing right here, and see, she can't. They can't hear in the jury. I've got a lot of people in the production room. The jury can't hear what you're saying, so she's looking at me like, what? So, Jack, sounds like Johnny's going to be the champion of the World Series of Poker. But the question that I have, and somebody brought it up during break, was, did you ever see the show Lie to Me?
Yes, I did.
How accurate? They take liberties all over the place?
Liberties all over the place.
Yeah, it's because I've had some seminars through the years of lie detection for lawyers, and everybody, like you were saying, everybody's tell is a little different. Some people say up to the right or up to the left, and it's you got to baseline somebody before you can ever determine that. Sometimes I'll drag an examination out for hours and try to see if I can fish it out first and then go with it. But like you said, mama's the best lie detector there is, because you just have that experience. Jack, I truly appreciate you being on with me. This is my second show, and when we were emailing, I said, man, I got a big fish in Jack Trimarco, and hopefully we get to work together on a case soon.
Thank you, John. Take care and best of luck.
Thank you.